West Virginia is going to be a very difficult team in 2026. Watch out for the Mountaineers in the Big 12.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Back into the Portal podcast in a crossover with Mountaineer Paul and WVU. Look, this is going to be a fun pod because nobody is dialed into his team more than Mountaineer Paul. I appreciate him stopping in. And thank you, everybody out there, checking out our podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one podcasting network in the land. And thanks to the fans for making that happen. Let's dive right in, man. We're going to talk about transfers. We're going to talk about the passing game and the schedule. But the transfers, I've got a handful here, and there's a couple that are obvious. Let's get the most blatant out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not know who Cam Cook is, you soon will. He's a very talented running back, played at Jacksonville State under Rich Rod a couple years ago. Now he heads up north to WVU. He gets his opportunity to be in the spotlight. Last year, 1,572 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5.7 yards per tote. That's legit. I don't care what level you're playing at. That's a lot of talent. What is the feedback so far, Mr. Paul, regarding Cam Cook through Spring Bowl?
Yeah, he's the leader of the room, obviously, and one of the leaders of the team. Although he's a quiet leader, he does things the right way. He knows how they want things done, especially with Coach Trickett, because he came over with Coach Trickett from Jack State. He followed Coach Trickett. He said as much in an interview. Listen, I love that guy. I'm going to follow him, and he followed. So, and obviously the scheme. Why would you change the scheme now when you just had what you had last year at Jack State? It's the same running scheme. He's going to be behind again. So that gives you a little bit of an edge. And, almost 1,900 scrimmage yards. We can get almost 300 yards receiving as well. So this is a do-it-all, what I consider like a five-tool player in baseball, a guy that can do everything, pass protect. And he is a missed tackles machine. Over 100 missed tackles last year forced, awesome, which was number one in college football. And he is a low center gravity guy, Brian. This is a guy that gets low, makes people miss. He's got elite burst, especially getting into the second level. And, he's a guy at the mesh point that you really don't know what he's going to do. He's a guy that can bounce it out. He's a guy that can take it up the middle. At his 5'9", 195, 200, you would think he would probably be more along the lines of a more scat back type player. He's not. He's literally a three-down back, which is why he toted it over 250 times last year. This is a workhorse, and Rich Rod and company can't be more happy to have him.
They should be. In all the years that I've watched Rich Rod, he usually has a primary back, but they rotate guys because they run tempo. You've got to have other players, and I'm sure they have some other guys coming back. Amari Latimer is a kid that I saw his junior year of high school. He's now at West Virginia. Do you think he's going to be number two, or is it still a competition at that spot, or is it, it's too early to tell?
Yeah, no, it's Amari Latimer right now, I would say, is the number two kid, but there's definitely competition there. Christopher Talley is another one that a lot of people, even ESPN is two different articles I've read from ESPN have him as one of the most underrated backs in the entire cycle. And so he's a guy. Martavius Boswell comes over from the JUCO ranks, a guy that's a 10, 300 meters guy, one of those classic Rich Rod guys, But, I wouldn't consider him an every down back. Amari Latimer is – listen, like I had Amari Latimer's father on the show the other day to kind of – because his brother came over from Wisconsin as well, Jameer Latimer. And, the thing about Amari is – very humble kid, but you're not the Georgia player of the year without being a really good football player. And it came down to the very end, Ohio State, Miami, Wisconsin, and West Virginia comes out of that thing somehow with him and really made a competitive offer. Obviously, I think Rich Rod and company knew exactly what they were getting in him, and he's perfect for what they want to do. He really is. And like you said, he's probably going to be an NFL guy someday. Be really surprised if he's not. And we're expecting a good big freshman year for him too as well, Brian.
He's a kid, even when he was a junior. I went to a game where both teams had P4 kids, and he stood out. And it was definitive. Like he could run 3 players, could go around him if he wanted, he could jump over. Like he did a little of everything. He was so physically developed for a player that was at that time. Again, he was only a junior in high school. I'm like, I didn't know who he was going into the game. I was there to see somebody else, but he stole the show. He's that good. So I think West Virginia is going to be able to run a lot of tempo, and you don't want to substitute. But the next drive, they can put in a guy that's just as good at running back like Amari. Like, then you know you're rolling because you can't just play the same guy the entire game.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's, that's an issue we ran into last year. In Rich Rod's system, as you well know, as you just alluded to, with the tempo especially, the last thing you want to let somebody do if you get them in a package that you're favored in is let them sub. And what that allows you to do is if you've got a running back that can run 6-7 plays in a row, that allows you to not let them sub and kind of keep them on the back foot. And a running back that can tote it 5, 6, 7 times in a row is not coming around every day these days. Last year they had issues with that. You'd have guys doing this after 2 or 3 straight runs, and you'd have to let somebody else sub in, unfortunately. And even though you have somebody on the back foot, they get to sub and they kind of get to catch their breath, and it could stall a drive out. So you got to be thankful for a guy like Cam Cook, who there's just no doubt that he can do those things. But Amari Latimer is showing early that he is probably more developed than your average freshman, similar to a Kevin Brown as well, who has been equally impressive, broke every single freshman record at West Virginia for lifting, which I sent you some things about this a couple weeks ago. You weren't surprised to hear that either out of him. Probably should have been a 5-star guy, but I'm not here to argue.
Yeah, they've got plenty of good young players, and they also add some other guys that I'm curious about. Teron Francis, he didn't really play last year at LSU. He's a highly touted kid out of Edna Carr High School. I was just at that high school the other day in Louisiana. They bring in Kamari Wilson, a guy that's played at a few schools. He started out at Florida, has been like Arizona State. Last year at Memphis, his coverage grade was 79, and his run defense was 73.5. That's a 6-foot, 210-pound safety. I'm never really worried about Rich Rod on offense once it gets into year 2, year 3. But recruiting elite defensive talent to West Virginia is not easy.
Nope.
Getting a kid like him, he's probably going to play a lot, I would assume.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the leaders back there. The thing that West Virginia has in their favor is they have an elite defensive coordinator, in my opinion. They just have to give him players to be good with, because no coordinator can be good without good players. It's just the way it is. Zach Alley, you were able to poach him from Oklahoma. They didn't want to lose him. Brent Venables tabbed him as the guy. And, he improved them in many metrics the first year he came in there from Jack State. And unfortunately, Rich Rod gets his head job, and Zach Alley owes Rich Rod a couple of favors, and West Virginia pays him more, and they poach him away, right? And they had to give him $2 million to do it. That's a very expensive DC hire, especially in the Big 12. So, we feel good about him as a coordinator, and we feel like we can be elite on defense if we get him the right players. We are not there yet in year 2 under Rich Rod. We totally understand what the assignment is this year. They've got now they're deeper this year. They feel good, I think, about it. I don't think they feel great about it. We actually feel great about the offense. I think we can be a top 25, top 30 offense this year. I think we can be a top 30 rushing team this year because, a lot of the things that they did. But on defense, it's going to be a work in progress, and I think they recruited to some positions that allow you to stay in games like safety. You play in a 3-3-5 defense, you want to have 3 good safeties. Well, Matt Sig, absolutely one of those guys, and has probably been, to be honest with you, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, the most impressive potentially out of all the people we've talked about so far in camp so far. He's had one-handed interceptions. I've had so many people tell me, oh my God, this guy stands out. And I got to give it to you, Brian. You told me about him as well, right? I wasn't even, because he was at such a small school, I kind of just, he wasn't on my radar as much, even though obviously highly touted kid. When we got him, obviously he was on my radar, but before then, not. And you told me, man, this kid you're getting is really good. He's shown to be that. And I think he will probably start at safety along with obviously the people that and Kamari is another kid that you start out Florida for a reason. You're not a bad football player usually if you start out at Florida, and the grades at Memphis were legitimate last year. I've got a bunch of all 22 tape on him. He is a good in coverage kid. I wouldn't want to put him, at the power 4 level in one-on-one situations too often. I don't think he's an elite speed guy necessarily. He's more of a physical guy that you can match up with tight ends and things. But certainly in the run side of things, really good in my opinion. I think there are some other guys on the defense, which you're about to bring up as well, that can help us.
Well, I think that's part of it. Like they're bringing in Tobi Haastrup, a kid that Oregon recruited. He didn't really get a chance there. They're ridiculously loaded on the D-line, so he transfers over. I don't know what he can do, but he was an elite recruit out of Houston. This is going to be the make or break. I told you before the pod, give or take, not even looking at the schedule that much, probably 7 wins year 2 is kind of where I would put them. If they got up to 8 or 9, it wouldn't surprise me because they might win a couple of shootouts. But if they're going to do anything postseason, like win a bowl game that's worthwhile or do anything else, it's going to be defense. And defense is about talent. You can scheme offense.
Yep.
Defense is about dudes.
Yep. Tobi Haastrup is a dude. Yeah, okay. He's a guy that runs 10-6 and 100 meters at 6'4", 250 pounds. One of the most elite athletes we've had probably in a while over there. That doesn't mean he's ready to start or play yet. He's actually probably still pretty far behind. He's only in his 3rd year of playing football in his life. So, he burst onto the scene as a senior out of Houston, as you said, and it was his 1st year playing, and he was so good as an athlete that Oregon caught notice and brought him in. He learned a lot last year. I've got several plays on tape where he dominated Isaiah Worlds in practice, the starting left tackle for Oregon, who came in from Nevada. And so, it's there. It's definitely there, and he's going to play. But, I do think that he's still really raw. He's obviously got the athleticism to just beat people because of that. There's practice footage of him. It's him, it's the defensive lineman and the skill guys on defense. And he outruns everybody, which I told somebody, I said, I don't know if that's good or bad, but so he's a guy that can really fly and is as big as he is pretty surprising. There's a couple other guys that are ahead of him right now that West Virginia has gotten. One of them is Ezekiel Durham Campbell, a guy that was at Coastal last year that had around 7 sacks, really twitchy guy, another 6'4", 250 kind of guy, as well as Harper Holloman, a guy coming in from Western Kentucky, and is another really talented pass rushing option. We feel like we're pretty set on the edges. In West Virginia's 4 wins last year, they averaged 6 sacks a game. And their losses, 0, right? So it's either feast or famine. Yeah. So, it kind of brought up pretty obvious, when Zach Alley gets a beat on somebody, it's a pretty rough day at the office for him. You look at the Pitt game, they sacked Holstein so much. I mean, I'm surprised that freshman didn't come in and replace him in that game. Famously, Holstein, after the Pitt game, had a broken nose with this piece of gauze stuck up his nose. And he said, they punched me, it was a pretty funny thing. But, I definitely think there's talent over there. The corner spot is going to be a spot I just have to see work before I'm convinced. They brought in a couple JUCO guys. They've got a guy named by the name of Shams Diagna, who comes over from Georgia State. That they've got 3 6'4" guys they brought in, and to play corner, and they're all 6'4". So that's the route they're going. 2 are JUCO guys. They were both top 10 JUCO guys, so they paid them well to come. But like I said, Brian, I have to see it to believe it. They're pretty set at linebacker. Defensive line is probably the most intact position group that's left from the last 2 years and replacing everybody. So, defense is certainly not as far along as offense. And we've heard as much in spring practice, especially on the offensive line, which is, in my opinion, you got a chance to be a top 3 O-line in the Big 12 this year. They brought in 5 guys that started at other schools, and 3 of those guys were all conference first team guys. Wes King never allowed a sack in his career at Wyoming, right? A guy that's 33 games, 0 sacks allowed. Devin Vass dominated the last 7 games at Kansas State last year, and he may not even start. So, there's a lot of talent on the O-line, more than I can remember in the last 8 or 9 years.
When we come back, we're going to break down a few more defensive players, and we're going to jump into the passing game. We know West Virginia can run. What's the quarterback situation going to be? That is next right here on this crossover, Locked on the Portal and Locked on Mountaineers. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. Wayday is here, and if you've been thinking about upgrading your space, this is the time to do it. We're talking about some of the best deals in the year for furniture, decor, outdoor essentials, anything that you need to refresh your home. And during Wayday, Wayfair is offering up to 80% with their fast and free shipping on everything, making it easy to find pieces that you find wherever you want to go with your room, front room, bedroom, or anywhere else, all for your style and your budget. So it's easy to filter. You can go with just furniture. If you want to do kitchen essentials, whatever you want to do, once you get on Wayfair, it's simple. It's wayfair.com. Anything that you want to find, you won't spend a bunch of endless time scrolling. And whether it's upgrading a room, adding something for your outdoor, maybe your patio, or just finding that what ties everything together, Wayfair is there for you. Wayday is the sale to shop, and the best deals are home. We're talking up to 80% off and fast and free shipping. Wayfair.com, April 25th through the 27th to shop Wayday. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style and every home. Make sure you check out the Everydayer Club down below in the description. There is a link. You can get ad-free episodes and more. Check out the Everydayer Club. All right. Defensively, Mr. Paul, I was going to ask you about corner, but you jumped into that. The one main question I have in the front seven, if I'm an opposing coordinator and or quarterback, is there somebody that I have to worry about on each play? Because until West Virginia gets to that point, it's difficult to really ascend as a defense. You got to have somebody they got to scheme against. Do they have that dude?
I would say to be determined, to be honest with you. I think there are some candidates, but is there an official guy that I could say, that's the guy? Like I wish I could say about Tobi Haastrup right now, or I wish I could say about other people. No, not yet. That's the part that I think they had to sacrifice to get better on offense this year. They spent $4 million on the O-line. I don't mean to keep going back there, but they did. They made sure 100% that Rich Rod was going to be able to do the one thing that we all know he can do, and that's scheme offense this year. And I think it gives them a chance going into next year because they'll have everybody back if they can retain them on offense next year. And in year 3, you're talking about potentially a Big 12, contending team. It's just whenever you're, what I consider a mid to, I think of it like this. If it's 25, 50, 75, and 100%, and that's the levels of funding for people, we're in between 50 and 75%, right? So it's hard to change it and flip it over like Indiana did in 1 year when you get such elite funding. So, you have to pick and choose your battles and your shots here at West Virginia. We're not underfunded by any means. We feel pretty good, but, we're definitely not in the category to where we can afford to flip everything all at once. So, in my opinion, they took some chances that can work out. And if they do, then we're going to be a much better team than I thought, Brian. But certainly there are some guys. We have good players on defense. We really do. But I would lean towards this defense being average at best at this point.
That's fair. Let's talk quarterbacks for West Virginia. Last year was a bit of musical chairs. You're trying to figure it out. It's year 1. That's not unusual, especially for Rich Rod. Michael Hawkins comes over from Oklahoma. I've seen him play live. Incredible athlete. He got thrown to the wolves as a true freshman at Oklahoma. Then last year didn't really get to play very much. What is the expectation with him? What's the pecking order? Is there any clarification yet on what's going on?
Well, let me just go ahead and put this out here first. Rich Rod will not tell you, right? But I have obviously have my sources, and one of the great things is that they allow the families to go to practice, so you can get intel right from people. And so what I do is I've just gathered intel from the people that are allowed to go to practice, and media, not one of those people, but that's okay. I understand why. So yeah, he has a slight edge right now. And the big reason is, Scotty Fox Jr., by the way, Rich Rod and everybody in the building is extremely excited about and has a chance to be, he would start on a lot of Power 4 teams, really would. As a true freshman last year, he played behind the worst offensive line in the history of West Virginia football.
They were terrible.
And so, he was really dynamic at times outside of that. Hawkins comes in, and the one advantage that Scotty had was he had a year in the offense. Hawkins erased that already. He's already picked it up. His dad is an NFL guy, and, he's just kind of a savant in a way. Like, that's what I was told from, his dad says that. Other people have said that. I had Teddy Lehman on, the all-time great Oklahoma linebacker that's a play-by-play guy there now, or a color guy for him now. And I played several clips on my show. He's got a podcast that he does with another all-time great Oklahoma linebacker. His name slips my mind. Curtis Lofton said he was going to be a Heisman winner at Oklahoma when he was there, and watched him every day. And Lehman, said, listen, I can count on this many hands how many days I went to practice, and said, is he better than Mateer? Like, that's how good he can be at times. And that blew me away, and so his arm talent is he's one of those guys that can throw it from a bunch of different angles. So it looks really impressive. And then he also runs 4.3. So it's like, man, is there anything he can't do? Obviously, he doesn't have the experience factor here, Brian, and that's the thing that nobody knows the answer to. How's he going to perform when it really matters on a team that's actually his? That's to be determined. I wouldn't be surprised to see he and Scotty go into the first 2 games of the year against lesser competition in Coastal and UT Martin, in rotation, probably. That's what he did last year, unless somebody just head and shoulders comes clear cut, which could happen. But it's very close. Actually, it's like, I would say a half a step ahead right now is Michael Hawkins Jr.
That's a really important factor. If Rich Rod has a quarterback,
yeah, I know,
it changes the ball game. I mean, they're good at running back. O-line is improved. Receiver should be, the way they scheme it. Even if they're average at receiver, with all the fakes and the misdirections and all that, there's going to be some schematical wide open guys, and I'm sure you've got a few. We'll talk about the skill guys on offense.
Yeah, there's some guys to talk about.
And we'll get into the schedule. Might be a little bit of an edge there for the Mountaineers on the schedule. That is next here on this crossover, Locked on the Portal and Locked on Mountaineers. Today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in the waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. TurboTax Expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book an appointment. Who are some of the, for lack of a better term, playmakers? Because wide receiver is probably not the right word in Rich Rod's offense, because there'll be reverses and screen. They use guys in the back. Like, there might be a receiver come in motion. He might be standing next to the quarterback, and on the other side is Amari Latimer. And they run options. Like, they'll do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So who are some of the playmakers besides the ones we discussed thus far?
So the number one guy should be Jaden Bray, a guy that transferred over from Oklahoma State 3 years ago. And he's unfortunately had 2 season-ending injuries that were freak. This is a guy that has NFL ability and unfortunately hasn't been able to stay healthy. He has looked spectacular so far in camp. This is a 6'2", 220-pound guy that he's got an NFL route tree. So we'll see what he ends up being. Obviously, the health is a big issue there. He hasn't shown that he can be healthy yet since he caught, 35 balls for like 400 yards and a couple. He was the second leading receiver on Oklahoma State's team behind Brennan Presley his freshman year. So, we felt really good about him coming in. He's grown as a player since he's been here. He even played under Neil Brown some, but unfortunately the injury. So we get him in, he's an older guy now. We think he's a mature guy. We'll see what he ends up being. You mentioned Teron Francis. There's been a lot of buzz around him in camp for sure. This is a Deebo Samuel-esque type guy. That's what he looks like to me. And that's the comp I would give. Obviously, I'm not saying he's Deebo Samuel. I'm just saying that's what he looks like. He is a running back that looks like he's playing receiver. And he catches the ball in space. He is such a tough dude to tackle. He's in that 6'1" to 6'2", 220-pound range as well. Really tough tackle. And obviously, Edna Carr, as you mentioned, John Johnson, obviously, who was there as well, the quarterback from the last couple of years there, has been very good as a skill guy, and they've got him at athlete, so they're going to move him around everywhere. But he's playing quarterback. But, Teron Francis. But Prince Strawn, actually, is probably been the other big buzz of camp right now. This is a 6'6", 220-pound kid that come over from USC, had an ankle last year. He was a 40-catch, 500-yard, 6-touchdown guy at Boise State 2 years ago. And, like I like to say, if Lincoln Riley says you're pretty good, I like to put a lot of stock in that. And unfortunately, the ankle happened, Brian. So I had his brother on. His brother's an NFL guy. His name is Mike Strawn. He was a 7th-round pick. He played for Charleston College. 7th-round pick, comes out, goes to the Colts, and he's still in the league. He's moving around a little bit. But, he is a really good player when you watch his film. I enjoyed watching Mike's film, but I had him on the show, and he said a lot of good things. Obviously, it's his brother, so take that with a grain of salt. But he said, yeah, he can be better than me. He runs 4.4. He's 6'6". He's 220 pounds. Obviously, USC loved him. He would have been their third guy last year, so take that for what you will. But the third guy at USC is the number one guy for a lot of places.
That is 100% true. All right, the schedule for West Virginia, you can take it for whatever it's worth, but the first 2 games should be W's. They open the year on the 5th of September against Coastal Carolina. Then the next week, no offense, I'm not too concerned about West Virginia losing to UT Martin.
Right.
Most important game.
Good FCS program.
Yeah, they do, but it's a solver. If you lose UT Martin, we need to have a podcast.
Bigger issues.
Yeah, that's a problem. The third game is the most important of the year to me because it's Virginia. It's kind of a rival. It's a border state. They should be good, but they shouldn't be great. And the game's neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to worry about going to play the Who's over there in Charlottesville. If you start 3-0, you've got a chance because the next 2 games, I don't know what you're going to get, and I don't think they do either. Oklahoma State's the first Big 12 game. It's in Morgantown. Now, they got a quarterback, that Mestamaker kid. Holy cow.
Yeah.
But they were
there's no doubt.
the worst team in the P4 last year. They were horrible. Completely flipped the roster, changed the head coach, all of it. Then the next game is on the road in the Big 12 against Iowa State, but they just lost half their roster to Penn State.
They're probably the most depleted team in the country.
Yep. You should win. If you somehow win the Virginia-Oklahoma State games, you should be 5-0.
Yeah.
At that point, it's almost impossible not to go to a bowl, yada, yada, yada. And then here's the rest of the schedule. It's interesting. If you want to just pencil in an entertaining game, just like if you're a fan watching this pod or listening to this pod at some point, you don't root for Mountaineers, okay, that's fine. Entertainment value. Fafita, the quarterback at Arizona, and his squad, they went, was it 9 or 10 games last year?
They're really good.
They're coming to Morgantown. Noah Fafita can spin it. Now, we don't expect West Virginia to be the 85 Bears on defense.
Yeah.
That could be a 42-39 game.
Could be.
And that game will just be a blast. After that, they've got West Virginia or Cincinnati's going to come to West Virginia. They lost their quarterback. He's the kid now at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
They go to TCU. They lost their quarterback. He went to Indiana.
Right.
The first game that I'm like, okay, you're not going to win. They play at Texas Tech.
Right.
I'll be shocked if they win that game. Then they got Kansas, Houston, and at Utah to finish out. Kansas, they lost their quarterback. Houston, they'll be good. At Utah, they lost their staff. I don't know what to expect, but they still got a pretty good roster. But overall, like if they win 8 games or something this next season, would it surprise me? No. Where do you stand on the schedule, the difficulty, and like what's your early prediction for the win-loss total?
Well, I mean, having as many home games as we do is a big plus, right? I mean, very rarely do you get such a lucky draw there. Obviously, the big swing game, Virginia. Chandler Morris being denied the other day was a huge thing
Okay, I
for
was
West
going to ask.
Virginia.
I hadn't heard about that. But that's a big
If
deal.
he's their quarterback, then Virginia's in potentially another 10-win team again. I went and looked at their roster. They return about 60%, 70% of what they had last year on an 11-win team. So they're not a bad football team. As a matter of fact, if West Virginia wins the game against Virginia, I could make the case that, depending on what West Virginia does, obviously the rest of the way, but let's say West Virginia does get to the Arizona-Cincinnati part of the schedule and they win those games, and maybe they dropped one to TCU or Arizona or one, but they're, 8, 9, and 1. I mean, I don't want to get too crazy here, but maybe you do have a shot, I mean, if you beat Virginia, that's returning all that talent, I think it's a good measuring stick game for that part of the schedule. If you're able to beat Virginia, you're probably able to beat or at least compete with Arizona and TCU. So it's going to be fun. Obviously, I think the schedule, like I said, it worked out well for us, in a lot of ways. Now, the one thing you can say about the schedule was we had to play, I think, 7 or 8 without a bye. So that's going to be a little tough.
That's rough, brother.
Yeah. So, that's the one part of this which I, kind of worry about. But other than that, the schedule works out well. Obviously, you look at who we missed this year. We don't have to play Arizona State. We don't have to play Houston. So we got kind of lucky there.
Well, no, you got Houston game right before the end of the season. You do have Houston.
What did I say, Houston? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say Houston. I'm going to say Kansas State. But
Kansas State's got a quarterback that's a senior. That matters.
Yeah. I just think they're going to be a lot better this year. But obviously they're about the all-time great quarterback in to be their head coach, and so it seems like we played Kansas State every year there for a while. But I feel like we're especially Arizona State. I think they'll have a bounce back year. I don't want to count Dillingham out. They lost their quarterback too, but they've got a lot of talent.
Yeah, Arizona State brought in 3 good transfer receivers, and they brought in Cutter Boley from Kentucky. They could be one of the surprise teams in the league. Real quick, let's talk about that. It's obvious Texas Tech is the favorite in the league. That's not a news flash. In my opinion, the Big 12 openly, and don't deny this, scheduled Texas Tech the way they did because they want to get them as close to undefeated as possible, and they didn't give them BYU in the regular season. They're trying to get 2 in for the league to get more money. I get it. But where are you on the Big 12 besides those 2? Those are the most common names brought up. Is it Utah next? Is it Arizona State? Is it Kansas State? Where do you think the Big 12's at after like BYU and Texas Tech there at the top?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think there's a couple teams in contention there, but I think you have to probably go with Houston at number 3. I think you have to.
They got a great staff.
They've got one of the best staffs in the country. They've also got one of the best quarterbacks in the country that nobody talks about. He's in his second year there. He had an incredible year last year. They won 10 games. They return a lot of that talent. They're in a similar spot to Virginia, except they return their quarterback, right? So, I wouldn't be surprised to see them right there. The Big 12 is going to be tough this year. I think a lot of people sleep on it because of the names attached to these universities. But when you look at it, I don't think there's a program in the country that want to play Houston this year. Not many. Are they as deep as, Alabama? No, I'm not saying that. But, I think that they're a dangerous team, especially within the confines of the Big 12. Not many teams are as deep as Texas Tech or BYU in the Big 12. But for the most part, Houston would be the next closest one, as well as Arizona. Beyond that, I think it's kind of a bit of a crapshoot. There's a lot of teams that could be good in the league. I think we're in that next mix. But, I would go probably, like I said, it's definitely – I'll mention Arizona State too, but I would say Houston, Texas Tech, let's go in order. Texas Tech, BYU, Houston, Arizona State-ish, and maybe Kansas could bump back up in there. A lot of people think Kansas because they're bringing back in Kodalnicki and that magic that he and Leipold have had for so long and finally back together again. They haven't been the same since Koloniki left. That's the facts.
True.
And sometimes a head coach and a coordinator are just a great marriage, Brian, for whatever reason.
I agree with that. There's always a team like that in the Big 12, isn't there, Paul? Like there's just that one team that they may not be the greatest, but every week, do you really want to see them on your schedule?
Yeah.
Probably not. And Kansas, they're going to find a way to put points on the board. Now, I know they lost Daniels. Like I understand that. But whoever the next guy is, and I haven't even studied Kansas yet, my guess is pretty strong that it's going to be a good football player. So I digress. But anything else you want to bring up about West Virginia football before we conclude, sir?
I think we've pretty much touched on everything. Just the last point is if you're watching West Virginia at all this year, I would say to look out for West Virginia to have – I wouldn't be shocked if they had the best offensive line in the league outside of maybe one or two teams. I'm a big believer in this O-line. Everything I'm hearing from other people are saying like it looks like a legitimate offensive line. And the thing is in the past, Rich Rod's offensive lines have been undersized, but they've cut angles on people and scheme people. This is an offensive line that would go 6'6", 6'6", 6'4", 6'6", and 6'6". So, it's a big offensive line that can move rather than just being an offensive line that can move. That's because they've invested there. So, Rich Rodriguez is one of those people that can win games with just offense because he understands how to use the tempo like we talked about. But, last thing is I think West Virginia I'm with you on the 7 games. I think that's where I've been for a while. And once we get to Virginia, maybe we can change that.
The Virginia game is the key. Week 3 for the Mountaineers in Charlotte. That ought to be a really good game against Virginia. Mountaineer Paul, please tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, so I post every day, 7 days a week, usually twice a day, definitely once a day. And that's at Locked On West Virginia, as well as on X at Paul Mountaineer, which I always tag every video to X. So
there you go. You can find the Portal Podcast all the same places you find Mountaineer Paul, Spotify, Apple, Podbean, and of course, over at YouTube. This has been a crossover Lockdown Mountaineers and the Portal.